What is going on, guys? We're here with the Christmas holiday spirit coming into FFBE, and we'll be looking at the new holiday units, Levinson and Lucas. So let's go over the first one here. Levinson, a very powerful hybrid damage dealer coming into FFBE, and as we go through the kit, you may recognize some similarities with some other characters. So his TMR here is the Mistletoe Clip. It is 40 attack, 40 magic, 15% ice, fire, wind, and earth resistance. So this is basically like Nagi's TMR headpiece here, the Black Fox shapeshifter mask, but this has some elemental resist on it. So if you're using this for a hybrid damage dealer, or maybe even a physical attacker, or just a mage, you might be throwing this on in a trial where you need some elemental resistance. So it's a very good TMR. If you get your hands on it, it'll be probably useful for you in one of the trials out there that has the need for elemental resistances. His STMR here is Levinson's Bag of Toys. It is a two-handed mace, all right, which has the general two-handed variance of what you would normally see a greatsword have, so it's 1.3. It has 150 attack and 140 magic, and it has the effect of Mighty Mary, which is going to give you 50% true double hand attack and 50% true double hand magic. So it's pretty powerful, especially for Levinson, but outside of anyone other than Levinson, there's not really another hybrid damage dealer out there, or even a true double hand damage dealer or mage that really is going to want to use a mace. So it's pretty much restricted just to him, even though anyone in the game can use it. So his TMR, in my opinion, more enticing to get than his STMR. Even he doesn't really need his own STMR. All right, so let's go into his kit and his skills here. As you can see, his equipment selection, he's got access to knives, swords, hammers, harps, throwing weapons, maces, and rods, and he has access to hats, clothing, and robes. Now let's move into his abilities here. He has throw items, great, that's fantastic, but he also has Be Merry, which is going to be an important skill for him. It's going to give him 130% attack, defense, magic, and spirit bonus, and increase his limit burst gauge by 10. But if you use it after the Pact with Present skill, which is going to be a very important skill for him, it's going to actually increase his limit burst gauge by 50. This is going to fully fill his limit burst gauge. And this is going to be a dual castable and triple castable skill. As you can see, if you're following along, it is highlighted. His next one is in Trust. It's called Special Delivery. Can't dual cast it. Now moving into some of the skills that we are going to use here, we're going to kind of ignore the Divine Ruination and Cast Wave Awaken skills. They do damage, but he doesn't really use them to do his big damage dealing skills. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. But we have the ornament skills, which are his imbues and his elemental resistance buffs. So he has access to 70% resistance buffs, as well as 5-turn imbues for ice, fire, wind, and earth. So very strong there for elemental options for the imbues on this character. He also has a little bit of extra support for different resistances as well. And they each buff and imbue different elements. So the ice imbue will give you a fire resist buff, whereas the fire imbue will give you an ice resist buff for your whole party there. Now he also has Shining Star. He can cure Charm, which is pretty neat. We have Bag of Toys, Flurry of Candy, which is a 26 times hybrid multiplier, Aurora Ray and Chaining Frame family. He has Native Dual Cast, as well as Bag of Toys, Toy Army. This is going to be one of his big damage dealing skills. It's a 31 times multiplier, and it will go all the way up to a 61 times multiplier. The Bolting Strike Chaining Frame family. I know a lot of you guys out there like the Bolting Strike family, and Bag of Toys Toy Army is going to be right there for you to utilize with him. Now let's get into his 7-star cooldown skills. We have Pact with Presence. Remember, this is the skill that's going to increase the other skill's power to give you 50 limit burst gauge crystals. So you'll be casting this on turn 1. It's a 5-turn cooldown, 250% attack and magic buff for 5 turns to the caster. It's going to give you 200% high tide for 5 turns to the caster as well, and this is going to give you a 10 times multiplier for different skills, which is Bag of Toys, Flurry of Candy, and Bag of Toys Toy Army, which are the 2 hybrid skills we just went over, Toy Army being the better of the 2. He has Checking It Twice here, 5-turn cooldown, available on turn 1. Decrease fire and ice resist by 100% for 5 turns to all enemies, and then increase your fire, ice, wind, and earth resist by 70% for 5 turns to the caster. That's 70%. I kind of, little slur there, 74, excuse me. But then he also gets Reveal Naughty List, Reveal Nice List for 5 turns. You can use these skills 1 time each, and we'll get to those. This Calls for War is his Magnus ability, 1 use per battle. It's got no cooldown on it, but you can only use this 1 time. It's going to give you an ice and wind resistance buff of 100% for 2 turns to all allies. And it's going to give it attack, defense, magic, and spirit increase of 200% for 2 turns to all allies as well. And it's going to give everyone the access to a snowball fight for 1 use as well. And this has no duration on it. As long as you have access to snowball fight, as long as that character does not die in battle, they're going to have that there. And we'll go under that with his unlocked abilities. Moving into his passives, we have Winter's Embrace for some Fire, Ice, Wind, and Earth resist, 20%, as well as some 10% MP refresh. He gets an attack, magic, HP, and MP percent passive of 20%. If you have Clothing on him, Defense and Spirit 30%. He's going to be immune to Blind, Sleep, Paralysis, Confusion, and Petrify. And he gets attack and magic of 20% when equipped with a mace. Luckily, this is his only attack and magic boost, or any sort of boost that is dependent on having a specific weapon equipped. So if you don't get a super TMR, really you're losing out on the 20% attack and magic. That's it. He has a chance to counter physical and magical attacks with Festive Spirit, which we'll get to as always. He's got attack and magic as well as defense and spirit buffs here. Attack and magic of 50% passive, defense and spirit 20%. He's got human and fairy killer, and then he gets 50% true double hand attack and 50% true double hand master. If you have his trust master ability ready to go, so you put his hat on or his own super TMR weapon, he gets an additional 50% attack and magic, as well as 30% defense, HP, and spirit, as well as MP. Upgrades his limit burst, gives you Turbo Slay, which is going to be permanent triple cast, and he's going to get 50% true double hand magic and 50% true double hand attack. So you definitely want to be having his TMR on and have this trust ability activated there. He gets a defense plus 20% passive, and then King of Toys is his final passive at level 120. 60% attack, 60% magic, and then 100% true double hand attack and 100% true double hand magic, as well as 50% more human and fairy killer. So he's got incredibly powerful passive here. 200% attack and magic, true double hand, and a whole bunch of attack and magic percent passives and 100% killers. And he's got some pretty strong HP defense and MP passive. I think it's 100% defense, 80% spirit, and like 50% HP. So very powerful passives for him. Now let's go into his unlocked skills here. We have Festive Spirit, which will randomly use some skills here, rocking around, deck the halls, and run Levinson run, which is going to give you either some HP or MP restoration if you want to use that Festive Spirit ability. Turbo Slay is permanent triple cast, and we have the Reveal Naughty and Nice lists. Reveal Naughty list is Fire and Ice and Peril of 120% for 5 turns to all enemies, and then you're going to get a killer buff for humans and fairies for your entire party by 25% for 5 turns. Reveal Nice list is going to be Fire, Ice, Wind, and Earth resistances buff of 80% for 5 turns to all allies, as well as a 74% attack and magic break for 5 turns to all enemies, and it's going to cure attack, defense, magic, and spirit break to all your party as well. So a very nice supportive skill that you can gain access to later on in the fight if you so desire. And then Snowball Fight is his last skill. It's going to be ice physical damage of a 0.1 multiplier to one enemy. It's going to dispel all status effects from that enemy and then try to inflict them with paralyzation. So this skill, it's his Magnus ability. It's not really that great, but this is going to allow you to have all of your characters have like one on-demand dispel. It's honestly, in my opinion, not that substantial. It's not super insane getting access to just dispels in your party. It could help you, but you also could just bring like Holy Torch, which is one of the best items in the game. I see myself using Holy Torches all the time. So if you don't have any Holy Torches, you can go buy them. And if you don't know Holy Torches, it's just an item that allows you to dispel an enemy. You can bring them up to 5 to a trial fight for you there. So that's a heads up tip if you don't know about the item and you're looking for some dispels on other characters. Now his limit burst here, if you have the upgraded version, which you're going to if you have his trust ability, it's going to be a 30 times physical damage mod to all enemies, and it's going to be a 30 times magic damage mod to all enemies, and give 150 MP to the caster. And then the big one here, it's going to be a 2 times multiplier to his Holy Divine Ruination and Chaos Wave Awaken skills, but then it's going to be a 20 times multiplier to Flurry of Candy and Toy Army for 9,999 turns, and it does cost 50 limit burst gauge crystals. So he's a very powerful character. Real TLDR run through, you're going to have triple cast unlocked passively because of his trust ability. And what you do with them is you're going to, use Pact with Presence on turn 1. Use that cooldown skill. You get your attack and magic buff and your high tide buff up. You're going to be able to imbue yourself if you want to. You can imperil if you want to, if you have someone else to imbue for you, or vice versa. And you're going to end that turn 1 with a Be Merry, which is going to increase your limit burst gauge by 50 because you did use this after Pact with Presence, including on turn 1. That's going to fill up your limit burst gauge. Turn 2, you're just going to limit burst with them. And then turn 3, you're either going to just do straight damage with them, or you're going to imbue or imperil, whichever one you didn't do before, and you're just going to start spamming out Toy Army over and over and over. So he works very, very similarly to Elena. That's his main damage dealing aspect. He does have some supportive stuff that you can do. like Elena can do. Elena just kind of like does those supporting things for the most part when using two Elenas, where you kind of have to go a little bit more out of your way with Levinson to get the supporting aspects, like the triple or quadruple elemental resistance imbues, or not imbues, but resistance buffs, or unlocking reveal nice list, etc., things like that. But he's going to be very, very strong if you're looking for a hybrid damage dealer. If you just want a Christmas unit and you end up with Levinson, you have a very powerful character on your team. Remember, Elena does do quite a bit of damage. Levinson is just like a tier 1.5, like a Elena version 1.5. He's got a little bit higher multiplier and 61 times mod. With those all of those multiplier buffs up there. Remember, you only have to use his limit burst one time, whereas Elena using your limit burst every couple of turns. Levinson does not have to do that. So very, very powerful character. 61 mod when both those multipliers are in effect. When his cooldown does wear out, you're gonna have a 51 times mod, and you use the cooldown again, and it's gonna be a 61 times mod. As long as he doesn't die, he's gonna be doing crazy, crazy damage with some support. So Levinson's actually pretty powerful. These characters are really, really strong. Moving into the next one, we have Lucas here, and Lucas is gonna be, I'm gonna put him as like a crazy. If you're a new player, you're looking through for a tank for some elemental resistances, this is going to be your guy. That's going to be his one caveat. So let's move into his Tmr the Prydwen. It is a heavy shield, which gives you 30 defense and 70 spirit, as well as 25% fire, lightning, and dark resistance. His super Tmr is the Fortified Curious. It's a heavy armor, 70 defense, 102 spirit, and then 30% fire, lightning, and dark resist as well. So you can already kind of see his theme of being an elemental resistance tank flowing into fruition here. He has access to dagger, swords, staves, which is pretty cool, and then rounds, maces, so if you're using something like Midnight Star from Lilith, and then fist weapons as well. Armor sections, he has everything in the game, from heavy armor to robes to light and heavy shields, hats, helmets. He's got access to all of it, so that's very, very helpful there as well. He also has a level 8 white magic, in case we ever get like a Kiraja materia. We'll talk about that. Now, he has the ability to use force engagement. This is going to be his big provoke. Now, most tanks nowadays, they just have like provoke for a couple of turns and then gives them mitigation. His is actually really, 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 really strong, part of his core kit. So what it does, it's 100% provoke for 4 turns to the caster, and it gives him fire, lightning, wind, and dark resist of 70% increase, as well as ice, water, earth, and light resist of 30%. So he gets giant elemental resistance buffs for 4 of them, a small elemental resistance buff for the other 4, but this is an elemental resistance buff to every element in the game for 4 turns for him, and it's also going to mitigate damage taken by 35% for 4 turns as well. He has defensive booster, which is a 120% defense and spirit buff for 3 turns to 1 ally, and a 55% attack and magic break. You probably won't be using this that often, but if you don't have a break in your party, he can do a 55% break. He has dual cast white magic, all right. Then he has offensive booster, which is a 55% defense and spirit break, and 120% attack and magic buff for a single ally. He has noble sacrifice, which it sounds cool on paper. I don't see you guys ever actually using this skill. Revive all allies except for the caster, so that's pretty cool there. And then it also recovers everyone's HP by 100% except for the caster. The problem with this skill is that he then dies afterwards. So if he's your only tank, you're using him to cover and all this other stuff. Once your tank's dead, if you bring in just 1 tank, then you don't have a tank anymore, and your party's probably going to die anyway. If you're bringing 2 tanks, then he's probably still has a job to tank some of the damage, so you might come back with a couple of your characters. But if you're reviving your other tank, then your other tank doesn't have provoke or anything going on, and now this tank doesn't either, and you're probably just going to go down anyway as well. There's probably be some niche circumstance out there where this might help you out, but for the most part, you're going to be looking for specific circumstances, like maybe revive everyone your healer's alive, they can put re-raise on, etc., etc. Now, moving away from that kind of stuff, he does have some unique aspects as far as tanks go. We've seen this on some other characters before, like Galuf, but he has some imbues for you. So he's got Guardian Fire, Ice, and Wind. All right, this is going to imbue himself for 5 turns, and then imbue 1 ally for 3 turns. So he's got Fire Imbue, Ice Imbue, and Wind Imbue for you there. He has Absolution, which puts auto re-raise on himself, and then increases his resistance to attack, defense, magic, and spirit breaks by 100% for 3 turns as well. Removes all debuffs from himself, and cures all status ailments on himself, which is pretty cool there. He has your traditional magic cover, so he's a magic cover tank here with 150% defense and spirit buff for 4 turns as well. So 4 turns of cover with a 4-turn buff associated with it. Pretty good there, pretty good there. And the damage mitigation is 50 to 70%, so it's the normal damage mitigation you'd get on a cover tank. He has Enchanted Aegis, which gives you a 500 HP barrier for 3 turns to all allies and mitigates magic damage taken by 25% as well. Then he has Ethereal Core, which gives 150% High Tide buff for 3 turns to all allies and gives you a 25% physical damage mitigation buff for 3 turns to your party. So he's got physical and magical damage mitigation for your party there too. He has Flurry Cannon, which is absolute 0 chaining frame family, and it's a 8.0 spirit mod, so nothing super insane, and it recovers 45 MP here to all allies when you cast the skill, and it should be, due to the asterisk here, a physical attack that does magic damage. So if you're dual wielding him for some reason, it'll dual wield cast, and it'll cast 2 times because of the dual wield, and you'll get 90 MP back to your entire party there. He does have W cast here. We'll get back to this in a minute. And then moving from W cast 6-star into a 7-star kit, we have Mythical Sanctuary, 6-turn cooldown, available on turn 1. Chance to protect all allies from magic damage, 80% proc rate with 60 to 80% mitigation for 3 turns. So that's a little bit higher than average. Usually it's 50 to 70. This one's 60 to 80. It also puts up mitigate magic damage taken by 50% for 3 turns to all allies as well. So this is actually a very powerful cooldown skill. It also gives you a little bit of MP refresh over time to your entire party, because not only does it put your cover up, but it's going to be a magic damage mitigation for 3 turns by 50% for all allies there. So very, very strong cooldown skill. You can start the fight with this and get the magic damage mitigation and the cover up at the same time. Moving into other cooldown skills, we have Elemental Cover, which mitigates magic damage taken by 75% for 1 turn to all allies, so sort of like a emergency use skill. It also increases fire, lightning, and dark resist by 100% for 3 turns to your entire party as well. Augmented Control here, 3-turn cooldown available on turn 3, increases your spirit by 200% for 3 turns to the caster, and then increases the multipliers of his damage dealing skills. He's got some couple counters as well by 6.0 for 3 turns to the caster as well, and it also unlocks triple machinations for 3 turns to the caster. He gets triple cast instead of just W cast. He has one last cooldown skill, which is Tri-Elemental Gift, 5-turn cooldown available on turn 1. This is going to unlock Gift of Fire, Gift of Ice, and Gift of Wind for 2 turns to the caster. Okay, so keep that in mind there. Very short access to those, and we'll get to those in a minute there. Then we have Epitome of Defense here, 1 use per battle. This is his Magnus ability. Increase resistance to all elements to all allies by 1 turn by 120%, and then mitigates magic damage taken by 90% for 1 turn to all allies. So this is literally the epitome of defense. What a great name, especially like an elemental resistance battle or against anything that does magic damage. You're not going down to magic damage as long as it's a magic attack. If it's a fixed attack that does magic damage, these sort of things still don't apply, but elemental resistance, you can't really ask much more than something like this. Moving into his passives, we have Spirit HP passives. He's immune to Confusion and Petrification. He does has 50% draw attacks. He's got Spirit MP by 30%, defense 20%, limit burst gauge by 2 per turn, MP of 7% per turn. Here's his defense and spirit miscalculations. He's got a counter for physical attacks, a counter for magic attacks. He has armored core defense. If you have a light or heavy shield on, doesn't matter which one, you're going to get an HP, MP defense, and spirit buff of 30%. He has 50% passive wind resistance. He has 100% chance to ignore a single fatal attack when his HP is above 1%. And if his HP ever does drop below 50%, he's going to get a 200% defense and spirit buff. If you have his trust ability activated with either his TMR or his super TMR, you're going to auto cast Arbitrary Barricade at the start of battle or being revived, so we'll get access to that. His counter chance goes up by 100%. He gets a 40% spirit buff passive, and then he gets an upgraded version of his limit burst. So you're going to want to have this activated due to all of those things. 20% spirit passive here, and then damage miscalculation is his last passive. Defense, spirit, HP plus 40% HP in defense and spirit, very strong. 20% resistance to all elements, all right? And then if your HP ever drops below 50%, you're going to increase your resistance to all elements by another 50%. So 20% all the time, up to 70%, but that is a buff, so keep that in mind. He has a chance to counter physical and magical attacks with damage miscalculations 3 per turn, so these are also his counters. Now, moving into his conditional stuff, and we'll go over the overview as always. Defense miscalculation and spirit miscalculation. Look out arena, because these are just 4 times multipliers that will cure your defense and spirit breaks and give you a defense and spirit buff of 150%. But it is Divine Ruination AoE counters. So this is going to chain with Liliths in the arena. So anyone who's got 1 Lilith, then maybe they'll get a Lucas. What more great stuff to encounter in the arena out there. People are trying to troll us out there. Arbitrary Barricade here. This is the thing that auto casts. You get a defense and spirit increase of 100% for 3 turns, and you get 1 stack of Mirage for 3 turns. Triple Machinations is just triple cast for the stuff that you can already triple cast. And then we have the gifts. The gifts are also really cool. 1 turn imbue and 1 turn imperil for 3 different elements. The imperil is 120%. So there's a fire one, an ice one, and a wind one. And the imbue is for every party member on your team, and the imperil is for all enemies. So gift of fire imbue for your entire party for 1 turn with a 120% fire imperil to 1 turn to all your enemies. So keep that in mind there. He's got a fire, ice, and wind version of that. And then damage miscalculation is his last counter. Magic damage, 3 times multiplier, spirit scaling. Increase your limit burst gauge by 2 to 5, and also chains with divine ruination. Increase limit burst gauge by 2 to 5. This helps out a lot. It's gonna, remember, proc the limit burst gauge generation from casting the skill, and then the skill is gonna do damage, and the enemies are going to drop limit burst crystals, and he's going to be able to pick those up as well. And he does have access to, you know, putting high tine on him, all that other good stuff. You're going to want to get that up there because the limit burst is very, very powerful and pretty expensive. His magic, he's got Kiraga, Refresh, Asunaga, Full Life, and Dispelga. He does not have Kiraja. He's got Kiraga. So keep that in mind. He's got dual cast white magic. Doesn't have Kiraja though. Here is his limit burst, his upgraded version, which you guys are going to have because he's just so powerful. What you're going to do here is it's going to cost 54 limit burst crystals, so very expensive. It's going to mitigate damage taken by 50% for 4 turns to all allies. It's going to put up 2 stacks of Mirage for 4 turns to all allies. It's going to recover 200 MP to all allies, remove all debuffs from the caster, and all status ailments from the caster. I really wish the debuffs and the status ailments was AoE. So he is really cool. He's very strong. His niche thing is elements. He's like the element tank due to that provoke. And I'm going to go over some downsides for Lucas so you guys don't lose your minds over him. I think he is very good. I'm going to get that out of the way. But he can be just a little bit awkward because his other role outside of just a tank is you can use him to imbue your characters. You can use him to imperil for your characters as well. And you guys know me. I love using imbues and imperils. But using something as important as a tank to do that, specifically one that's set up like Lucas, is going to be a little bit awkward due to the fact of what he can and what he cannot double and triple cast. As you can see, his provoke and his cover skills, all of them cannot be a part of his W or triple cast. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to spend the entire first turn to use him to cover if he's your tank, which means if you want to imperil with him on turn 2, you're going to unlock them and do something else. And then on turn 3, you can finally go ahead and use your 1 turn imperil. All the while, you're not really unlocking triple cast either. Now, you can go ahead, turn 1 cover, have what you, turn 2 W imbue, and then have someone else imperil for them. That's fine. The other one thing about him, so that kind of answers that problem. You're going to have to wait until doing damage on turn 2, which is fine. You can use him as your imbuer that way, unless you want to provoke with him. He can do a 100% draw attacks build, which is something that you can do, but the 100% draw attacks build is an incredibly powerful build for all the tanks in the game, never having to provoke, never having to worry about it, never having to worry about having to provoke ever. Maybe he goes down, you get re-raised, that's a plus. You can guard, mitigate damage that way, that's a plus. But one of his strongest skills that sets him apart from all the other characters in the game is his provoke because of the elemental resists associated with it. So if you really want to use that provoke, you don't really want a draw attacks build on him. You might even think about this less of as a provoke, because you will probably put a draw attacks build on him anyway, and more of a giant elemental increased resistance buff for himself, as well as some damage mitigation, because you're always going to have the draw attacks on him. The problem is using him as a cover unit and putting up his own elemental resistance buffs and imbuing for your party and imperiling for your party. You might run into having it take too much time for you to do what you want. If you want to take the fight a little bit slower, then sure, go for it. But don't look at all of the stuff that he can do and think you're going to be able to do all of it right away. He is still very, very powerful. It's just not all going to happen. You're not going to be cover provoke turn 1, imbue 2 dudes, and imperil on turn 2. That's not happening. You're going to be covering turn 1, provoking turn 2, unlocking triple cast in your other skill on turn 3, and then finally imperiling and imbuing on like turn 4 if you want him to provoke for you and get those buffs up and put up the damage mitigations for your party, etc., etc., etc. So he's got a lot of cool stuff that you can do. Don't think that he's going to be doing all of the offensive stuff and all of the defensive stuff at the same time, because the tank role is a very, very important role, and they have to do certain things in a certain order, because if they're not provoking and they're not covering, your team's just going to die, guys. So Lucas, very, very strong. Both these units I think are very, very top tier. Remember, guys, White Knight Noel is getting his EP skills. We'll be taking a look at those EP skills as well. And Last year, right after Christmas, I keep telling you guys the holidays are right around October until the end of February. We get hit with time-limited collaborations, CG units, all this other stuff. So if you don't want these units, you just think they look cool, there's always going to be better units to come out. But if you are a Christmas holiday unit winter fan and you're wondering if these characters are good and they're going to be good for you, and you just wanted to see if the holiday units were good before you pulled, these units are both fantastic characters in every way, shape, and form. Lucas is out there doing work, and if you want an elemental resist tank that's kind of his niche, if you don't really need the elemental resistances, you've kind of already got the gear and stuff like that, he's gonna be a little bit worse for you than he would for like a new player who doesn't have a lot of elemental resist gear. If you have all that gear, he's really not gonna be that special, and you can safely pass on him. If you want a hybrid damage dealer, Levinson's right out there as well. A little bit better than Elena. He's going to do more damage than Elena for sure, because he's so much easier to use, and his limit burst doesn't need to be used more than one time. So very strong there as well. But nothing like super meta shaking if you just got like Noctis or something else. You don't really need the best damage dealer. You don't need the newest one, as I tell you guys to always pull for what it is that you think you would enjoy. So with that said, guys, happy holidays out there. This is going to be our Happy Holidays 2019 banner, I guess. There's going to be a bundle review as well with how Winter Amelia and Amelia, I do believe. Remember to leave a like to support the channel if you want to. Helps out every time. Thank you for spending some time here today. I tried to keep it clear cut and concise, but there's just a lot to talk about. So apologies about that. I was going to say thanks for spending a little bit of your time here, but thanks for spending a lot of your time here today, guys. Be safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.